Harmony and greetings. Today, I set my good intentions that I may progress in this path called life, that I might learn, that I might do better. By setting intentions as necessary, even moment by moment, do I help to ensure that what I do is well guided. I give my thanks, as always, to my teachers, and I give my thanks to everybody in existence. Everything is a field, and all this marvelous interaction, it produces things. Some are delightful, and some are horrendous. What I like to think is that something can be learned from all of it. But the most important lessons, the things that strike to the core, those are the kinds of lessons that when one has the proper intention, where ought the lesson to go? That is something that can help the aspirant, or even people who just want to manage day to day. What I have found out on this quest, I had been following the lives of saints and sages, and again it was brought to my attention an essential thing, how they gained wisdom. It wasn't by sitting by someone, listening to them and then saying, ah yes, that's right and that's right, or if I don't fully accept it now, I'll add it to my little bag of tricks here and see if that can't help. And in the end, I'll be full of this knowledge. And this knowledge is, of course, going to be my treasure. Knowledge has its place. But when I had experienced through my grandfather the deterioration of Alzheimer's and things like that, he was a very bright, knowledgeable man. All that knowledge was gone while he was still alive. Can't count on knowledge. Can't count on the next moment. But one of the things that people want, or seem to want, is a speedy way from where they are to some kind of an awareness, some kind of revelation, some kind of a grasp or apprehension, the very crux of the thing, the meat of it, as it were. What is it? What is this elusive thing? What is this wisdom? I think that if one listens to something and regards it as wisdom, then at the very least that person is in that wise already possessed of wisdom. That the wisdom has come to them and they recognize it, just as somebody who knows cauliflower by flavor has eaten it already. And if it's in a new dish dressed in a different way with different vegetables around it, they will still say, ah, cauliflower. In that way, one can also say that the words of the wise will resonate if one is already wise. But in terms of actually getting somewhere with this, other than just being sitting attentively to a teacher, reading out of books, listening to audio recordings, video presentations, attending sacred sites, going on pilgrimages, passing tests. There's not a single substitute for experience. The participant, the would-be aspirant, has to walk a walk, has to pick up a stick and use it as a pole and go along a path that seems crooked here and straight there, slippery here and well-footed there, steep here and level there. And some points of the path, some encounters are a little more turbulent, uncertain, rockier than others. These are the important ones, not the pleasant ones. People like to sit and say, oh, this meditation is a pleasant experience. I could pass the day like this. That's wonderful if you can do that. I don't know anybody who does. Never met them yet. If I can cite a thing, it used to be that Walmart had aquariums and they would sell some interesting creatures. Some of them were rather exotic. And I had gotten it was a tiger salamander, about that big. And out of the back of his head were gills. His eyes were like a fish and open and unblinking. And I found him beautiful. At least I think it was a him. I even named him Thor. And so I kept him, and I had also gotten an albino frog. And that one I named Loki. Well, Thor and Loki prospered, and Thor wound up maturing and getting out of the water, and I had to prepare something other than a tank for him. However, to get there, I would feed them live things like crickets, worms. It was easier to get worms. And to feed these creatures. And it was amazing. This albino frog, he was no bigger than this. He would take a worm like this big, and he'd pack it in. It was the most amazing thing. But this is how creatures are in the wild, and this is how they are in captivity. You give them the chance, you give them the opportunity. I had a happy time with them. I enjoyed coming home, attending to them, seeing them grow. And at the time, I was attending my teacher in Vajrayana, a Tibetan Lama. And he had a particular talk, and in the talk, he was saying how we are not supposed to contribute to death. And immediately I thought of my feeding live worms and such to my two pets. So I said, "Sir?" And he says, "Yes, what is it?" I said, "I have a pet salamander and a pet frog. They're exotic creatures, but I feed them live worms. Is that a problem?" Somebody in the back laughed, but the teacher looked very displeased. And he says, "That's not a thing to do. Why do you have these creatures?" And I said, "Beauty." And he says, "I do not approve." I let it go, but I had a heavy heart. He went on to the rest of his talk, and I wound up driving home feeling very miserable. I knew what I had ought to do in the name of life and living. I sang songs through tears going down my cheeks. I didn't know I could cry so much. I came home right away. I collected the two beings in appropriate containers for transport. I took them to a pond and to a woods, and I gave them my prayers as I let them be. It hurt very much. And my next meeting with my Vajra sisters and brothers, I said, I did what Rinpoche wanted. I let my pets go into the wild. "Oh, wow, Carl," they said. "I couldn't do that." That's something. That didn't make me feel any better. But I told my teacher, who was already back in Asia, and he sent me a postcard, and he says, "It's a wonderful thing that you did." That was a moment where I began to gain. And I'm convinced I began to gain because I suffered. Because the suffering of other beings was there, and I put the knowledge of that ahead of my own feelings. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but that was one instance. And I share it with all of you because I know that, as I had just said, that was a positive line of demarcation from working as a struggling meditator to suddenly things were making sense. I'd like to know the spiritual guide who's worth a hoot, who didn't have suffering in his meditations, in his experience. And everybody, every sage, every awakened being, every abbot of a monastery that's had stories written about him, the nuns who had reached great spiritual heights. Name me a solitary one of them who was not prompted or empowered by suffering, by taking suffering in the light of a guide that suddenly opened a door or several doors. As the world is full of suffering, you have plenty of material. We all do. We continue to. I had a tremendous bit this morning, and I intend to use it in positive ways. That the suffering that's about, may it help us. May it somehow guide us. And may it not be for nothing. And may one day we come to somebody who is suffering and lay hands on them and say, I understand. And may I help. This has been Paladin Carl. May your path be good.